Physical and cognitive development in middle childhood. During middle childhood, ages 6 to 11 years, height per year slows to 1 to 3 inches. Though weight gain also slows to 5 to 8 pounds per year, children double their weight in the middle childhood years. Towards the end of middle childhood, at about age 10, girls begin their growth spurt, a 2-year period of rapid growth, which peaks at 11 years old, followed by puberty at 12. Girls are 2 years ahead of boys with their growth spurt. Thus, girls mature physically 2 years before boys do. Girls are generally a bit taller and heavier than boys from ages 9 to 12 years. Once the boys' growth spurt kicks in, peaking at 13 years, boys are taller, heavier, and stronger than girls. Puberty for boys happens at about age 14. Children need 1/4 of their daily caloric intake to be supplied by a balanced breakfast, about 600 calories. Proteins are necessary for growth and muscle repair, but are in ample supply for most children aged 7 to 10. They consume over 70 grams of protein daily while needing only 28 grams. Complex carbohydrates like potatoes, cereal, bread, and pasta are preferable to simple carbohydrates found in sweets. Sweets are empty in that they supply little nutrition, but they are not the notorious hype-up agents as is commonly believed. Increased sugar consumption usually occurs with the excitement of a holiday or company or family outing or party or some kind of deviation from normal routine. This latter excitement is probably more of a causative agent for children's hyperbehavior than increased sugar. I would definitely advise against giving children significant amounts of artificial sweeteners. Research some of what is coming out about artificial sweeteners. Cold water with a lemon twist is not so bad. Children begin losing their baby teeth at about 6 years old, replacing them with about 4 permanent teeth per year for 5 years. Girls tend to begin this sooner than boys, but genetics plays a big part in this timetable. The first molars erupt at age 6, the second molars at age 13, and the third molars, or wisdom teeth, in the early 20s. Dental health of children is improving due to fluoride additives in toothpaste and water, and procedures like sealants which adhere to the surface or biting edges of the teeth. 55% of U.S. children aged 5 to 17 years have no cavities in any of their permanent teeth. Children whose weight in comparison to height is higher than that of 95% of other children the same age and sex are considered obese. Obesity is an eating disorder involving both nature and nurture. At least 2 genes for obesity have been isolated. We know there is a genetic component. Some people are endowed with an inefficient metabolism which allows them to use up all available calories like a gas-guzzling old car, while others have a very efficient metabolism. They may consume the same amount of calories, but will have leftovers to store. Compare this to a fuel-efficient car that can get so much more out of a tank of gas. Nurture is involved in childhood obesity also, since children tend to eat the same kind of foods in the same patterns as their families. They may eat late at night because others do, and they may eat to reward themselves for something like getting dessert for cleaning their plate. They also are influenced by the exercise and the activity patterns, or lack thereof, and the television habits of their family members. Aerobic exercise programs are not as beneficial for youngsters as lifestyle changes are, lifestyle changes that carry over into adult life, things like bicycling or walking or swimming. Blood pressure should be taken yearly from age 3 years through adolescence. Taller children normally have higher blood pressure than shorter ones, and this is figured into the tables. If a child consistently measures too high, then steps to prevent heart damage must be taken: diet, exercise, reduced salt intake, and sometimes medicine. Stuttering, the involuntary frequent repetition of syllables, leads to frustration and anxiety, low self-esteem, and social problems. Stuttering is 3 times more common in boys than in girls. Stuttering runs in families and begins gradually before the age of 10 years. Cognitive development. School is a major environmental factor in the development of children. Not just cognitive development, but social and emotional development as well. Middle childhood is heavily influenced by school experience. The major cognitive skills of middle childhood include conservation concepts, classification skills, and memory abilities. Children are able to think about their thinking or use metacognition, the ability to think about one's own thought processes. Metacognition. Metacognition includes learning that people have different viewpoints, reality and perception may differ, different problem-solving strategies work best at different times, and there are things you can do to aid memory. So metacognition includes all of this learning. We are going to cover 3 theoretical approaches to cognitive development: Piaget, Vygotsky, and information processing. In Piaget's theory of cognitive development, children proceed through the concrete operational stage between the ages of 7 and 11 years. This is the stage in which children can problem solve more logically, but they still are limited to tangible or actual events in the here and now, real things they can touch or see. Children in middle childhood are no longer hampered by the limitations of centration, which is the ability to focus on only one aspect of an object at a time. They're no longer hampered by the appearance-reality problem, where changes in appearance meant changes in substance. They are limited, however, by insufficient knowledge, which may make them reason poorly. Logic is limited to concrete reality, objects, and events. The child can solve concrete, hands-on problems. Conservation, or the ability to know that certain characteristics of an object remain the same despite changes in appearance, is a skill mastered for children once centration and appearance-reality problems are behind them. Conservation takes several years. Conservation of number and length begin first in the preschool years, then conservation of mass, area, and weight. Displaced liquid volume is the last conservation task to begin, and it's the last one to be mastered between 9 and 11 years old. A pre-operational child would not be able to see that if the contents of a short, wide container were poured into a tall, narrow container, the amount of liquid would not change. He or she would think the tall container held more. A concrete operational child would understand that the volume remained the same and only the containers changed. He or she would know that the increased diameter compensated for the height. This ability to focus on more than one dimension at once is called decentering. It allows for conservation of number and weight also. For example, a concrete operational child would know that two rows of blocks are still equal even if you spread out the blocks in one row. Another example, a concrete operational child would know that two amounts of clay are still equal even after one ball of clay is flattened into a pancake shape or rolled into a snake shape. Classification skills change in middle childhood just as conservation skills do. Classification skills begin in the preschool years when children can sort items according to one dimension, like color or shape. In the middle childhood years, there are more systems of classification which become operable. Children in middle childhood can arrange objects in sequential order according to one aspect, like size, weight, or volume. This is called seriation. The child understands that B can be larger than A but smaller than C. If asked to arrange a series of sticks in order according to length, a child of 4 or 5 years can pick out the shortest and the longest ones. By age 5 or 6, the child can arrange all the middle sticks correctly through trial and error. By age 7 or 8, the child can do the task successfully on site without trial and error. The child understands reversibility. Reversibility is thinking backward, or two-way thinking. Child can now mentally reverse a series of steps, like retracing where he or she has been in hopes of locating a misplaced object. The child is capable of conservation because he or she can reverse the steps of pouring out the liquid or smushing the clay and realize that the starting amounts were equal. Children can now return to his or her original starting point in figuring out math. If he or she knows that 3 plus 5 equals 8, then he or she is capable of understanding that 8 minus 3 equals 5, and 8 minus 5 equals 3. Number families are not relevant to children before they have learned reversibility. Pre-operational children may memorize number families, but these math facts certainly are not the connected aids that teachers are hoping for. Number families do not make things easier unless the child has reached the concrete operational stage. By age 6 or 7, a child can count in his or her head and can also count ahead to add more to a certain number. For instance, 5 plus 3 would be solved by starting at 5 and counting up 3 more places, or starting at 3 and counting up 5 more numbers. By age 9, the child can do subtraction by counting up from the smaller number or down from the larger number. As a younger child, the fingers or other objects were used to count. Until a child is able to classify, seriate, and reverse, he or she is not ready to read. He or she must also be able to conserve. An A is still an A, even if the sound it designates is different. A child must be at or near the concrete operational stage in order to make sense of reading technique. Some children have a slower individual rate and may not be as ready to read as some classmates. This has little to do with intellectual potential unless it is mishandled by educators, teachers, and parents. Once children have been made to feel inferior and less worthy, like they just don't measure up, then in all likelihood their competence will be negatively affected even when their timetable is ripe for reading readiness. Vygotsky contributed a theory that emphasizes the role of culture, interaction with others, and language in cognitive development. Rather than stages, Vygotsky focused on the zone of proximal development, or potential, or learning that is possible with mediated help. This area or zone cannot be predicted or measured and should never be underestimated, even for severely disabled children. At the same time, the potential should not be overestimated, so that material is presented to a student way beyond his or her zone of proximal development. Frustration will result. Social interaction and cognitive development are intertwined. Children bounce ideas off of the people in their immediate environment first, and then in their extended environments of school and neighborhood. Adult teachers are more effective than peer teachers, but the adults must understand the learner's immature point of view so that he or she knows the most effective way to convey a more advanced view. The adult must have a handle on how the learner is thinking in order to best teach new material. Peers are effective teachers too, especially if the children involved know each other and already interact. Plus, if the task to be learned is not too complex. Middle-class children are used to plenty of test questions at home. What sound does a dog make, duck make, cow make, pig make, horse make? Where is your nose, your eye, your ear, your mouth? What's that? The person asking the questions already knows the answers. These children have an advantage over those children whose parents do not continually ask these types of questions. They also have an advantage over those children who find a mismatch between behavior and responses employed at home and those expected or demanded in school. Information processing theory of cognitive development emphasizes quantitative rather than qualitative changes in the way children think. Memory and other processing skills are focused upon how children gain and use information. Memory is thought of using the analogy of a computer with three storage systems: sensory register, short-term memory, and long-term memory. The sensory register, likened to a keyboard, takes in and encodes lots of information from our senses very briefly, 1 to 3 seconds. Short-term memory is what you are using at this moment, likened to a monitor. Short-term memory's capacity increases considerably in middle childhood. Only 7 pieces of info can be remembered at once, even as an adult, unless chunking or rehearsal takes place to increase capacity. Long-term memory, likened to the hard drive or a disk, stores retrievable information for long periods of time. Information processing explanations of the development of children's conservation abilities differ from Piaget's explanations of the development of children's conservation abilities. The information processing theorists emphasize changes in children's use of rules and problem-solving strategies. Information processing proponents see the changes involved with conservation tasks as quantitative rather than qualitative, as more advanced, not as altogether different abilities. According to information processing theorists, 4-year-olds treat a conservation task as if it involved a contingent truth dependent on sensory information. 7-year-olds consider the task to involve necessary truths, possible without sensory info or observation. Contingent truth is knowledge that is dependent on information gathered through the senses, like knowing it is raining because you hear the patter on the roof, or see the drops on the windshield, or experience thunder and lightning. Conservation employs necessary truth, which requires logical necessity apart from what you can observe with your senses. If you know no more has been added or taken from an original amount, then the present amount equals the original amount, despite possible changes in appearance. Necessary truth is knowledge that can be validated without resorting to sensory information or observations. Irregardless of whether Piaget's explanations for conservation, qualitative, or information processing explanations for conservation, quantitative, are believed, the facts remain that conservation concepts begin in preschool and are used to measure and reason with concrete quantities in middle childhood and with abstract quantities in adolescence. When we recall information, it often consists partly of newly acquired data and partly of influences from previously stored data. This process is referred to as constructive memory. Preschoolers have limited knowledge in memory, but as the general knowledge base expands in middle childhood, constructive memory becomes increasingly evident. In addition, the child uses mnemonic strategies to facilitate memory or to aid recall, something preschoolers do not often spontaneously use. It is not until the age of 10 years that a child is able to use mnemonic strategies consistently and effectively. Mnemonics refers to techniques for remembering, the art of memory, strategies that make encoding, storage, and recall easier. A mnemonic technique can be as simple as leaving the things you want to take on a trip with you by the front door so that you don't forget them, or rehearsing something over and over, or making a list of things. There are plenty of peg-type mnemonics where certain pegs are placed in memory and new information is associated with them. Like the items in a familiar room can be linked with a list of things you need to remember. As you walk through this room in your imagination, the associated items will surface with the familiar pegs or room items. This is called the loci method. Each time you take the mental tour, you remember the new item associated with each familiar item and in order. So a grocery list put into peg-type mnemonics, you would think of a squished loaf of bread on the sofa. The next item, coffee table, you would imagine eggs rolling off of it because that's the next item on your list. Lettuce hidden in the plant next to the coffee table. Ketchup spilled on the carpet right next to it. Paper towels in the magazine rack next to the television, etc. And as you take that imaginary walk through that familiar room, the items to be remembered will surface. Acronyms is another type of mnemonics. Acronyms are words formed from letters which cue memory. Here are some examples. FOIL, F-O-I-L, the order of operations in the multiplication of binomials. F equals first by first, O equals outer by outer, I equals inner by inner, L equals last by last. Another acronym, ROY G BIV. This is used to remember the colors of the spectrum: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. SEND Mr. Curie. This refers to the 10 systems of the body: skeletal, endocrine, nervous, digestive, muscular, respiratory, circulatory, urinary, reproductive, and integumentary. BANGS. classes of French adjectives that precede nouns: beauty, age, number, gender, size. Face, spaces on the treble clef. Oil rig. Oxidation is loss, reduction is gain. This implies electrons for chemical or chemistry students. All of these are examples of acronyms, words formed from letters which cue memory. Acrostics, this is another mnemonic, short phrases in which the initial letter of each word cues memory. That's acrostics. Examples: every good boy does fine. Mine's on the treble clef. E, G, B, D, F. On old Olympus's towering top, a Finn and German viewed some hops. This coordinates with the 12 cranial nerves. My very educated mother just served us 9 pizzas. Order of the planets, arranged by distance from the sun, nearest to farthest: Mercury, Venus, Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And with the last research, we may have to rearrange this. Pluto is losing favor as a planet. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. Order of operations in algebra: parentheses first, exponents second. Next order of business: multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. This way you won't get in trouble any longer when doing algebraic examples on a test. Peanut butter with bread equals the 4 main body fluids: P for phlegm, B for blood, W for water, B for bile. Medical students may need this little acrostics to help them remember. Chain mnemonics refers to rhyming, auditory cues. For example, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492. I before E except after C, and when sounded like A, as in neighbor and way. 30 days have September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, save February, which has 28 and 1 day more every year in 4. So these rhymes give us auditory cues. They're called chain mnemonics. The keyword method uses concrete objects easily visualized, like for peg words, but there is no set list needed. Instead, you use sound-alike words. Use keywords to associate terms and definitions, faces and names, states and capitals, foreign word with word in mother language. So, to learn the definition of persuade, use the keyword method. Visualize a girl talking her mother into buying her a purse she wants. To learn the Spanish word carta, find an English word that sounds like part of it, like a cart. Imagine a grocery cart with a huge letter in it. Carta means letter. To remember that proactive interference refers to old information interfering with new information rather than the other way around, visualize someone too old to pee. P starts the word proactive. To learn that Bismarck is the capital of North Dakota, imagine a biscuit with ND imprinted on it instead of Nabisco. To remember how to spell separate correctly, visualize a rat in it. You'll never put too many E's in separate or separate again. A rat, S-E-P, a rat, E, separate. To associate Van Gogh as the artist of a particular painting, imagine a van going across the corner of the canvas. The letter people of Sesame Street used the keyword method. M, munching mouth. S was Sammy the Snake. And there are other mnemonic strategies. May I have a large container of coffee? This is a way to remember the value for pi up to 8 digits, using the number of letters in each word. May has 3. Then you have to remember where to put the decimal, which is after that first number, 3.1415926. May I have a large container of coffee? The different letters in the word equal up to the number that you have to remember for pi. The key to all of this, the key to all these memory aids, is to make the information to be remembered meaningful in some way. The best way to learn and remember is to understand. Hook new information with familiar things that mean something. Plug into relevant things already experienced. The psychometric approach attempts to measure the individual differences in general intelligence by way of intelligence tests, IQ tests, or aptitude tests. Intelligence is the global capacity to think rationally, act purposefully, and deal effectively with the environment. How we use knowledge to think, solve problems, make decisions, and use language are all part of intelligence. Ability or abilities to acquire and use knowledge for solving problems and adapting to the world are all part of intelligence. Intelligence is culturally defined so that what is considered a mark of intelligence in one culture is not considered so in another. Physical grace is a sign of intelligence in the Balinese culture. Spatial concepts are intellectual commodities for the Aborigines and other hunter-gatherer cultures. The ability to remember 10 to 20,000 names of clans means intelligence for the Iatmo people of Papua New Guinea. The ability to navigate by the stars is a sign for intelligence among the people of 680 Caroline Islands in the Pacific Ocean east of the Philippines. Number and word manipulations are intelligence markers for industrialized societies, especially if they can be done with speed. Buganda culture in Uganda look at people who are slow in thought and able to say socially correct things as wise and intelligent. There is no universal definition of intelligence that satisfies all psychologists. Trying to define intelligence is like trying to define something as abstract as love. 20 people will give 20 different spins on the meaning. Psychologists cannot even agree whether intelligence is just one basic mental ability, one nature, that affects all cognitive performance, or whether intelligence is a collection of several abilities, like verbal, spatial, musical, mathematical, etc. The triarchic theory of intelligence by Robert Sternberg is another example of a collection of several abilities. It stresses process over content. The 3 essential parts of intelligence are componential, experiential, and contextual intelligence. Componential intelligence includes analysis and reasoning and information processing skills like attending to, storing, retrieving, and manipulating information. Componential intelligence involves the abilities that most school assignments require. These people high in componential intelligence are the ones who excel on traditional IQ tests. Experiential intelligence includes prior knowledge, insight, originality, creativity, how one handles new as well as familiar tasks. Experience changes the choices and behaviors that are considered intelligent, so that experiential intelligence for a child is quite different from that of an adult. Contextual intelligence includes street smarts and practicality. It pays attention to the context in which behavior takes place. It sizes up a situation and decides whether to change it, adapt to it, or to get away from it. Does intelligence describe content, the different abilities underlying problem solution? Or does intelligence describe process, or the way people collect and use information, collect and use content, like in Sternberg's triarchic theory? This process approach to intelligence, Sternberg's, is pretty new. Process theorists propose that intelligence includes not only the ability to adapt to changing environments, but the ability to shape the environment to maximize opportunities. Not only the ability to handle novel problems, but the ability to do it creatively and quickly. Not only the ability to acquire thinking strategies, but the ability to apply them judiciously. This includes street smarts and common sense or practicality. Intelligence is not a fixed property, said Vygotsky. It is continually open to change. It is a current state of affairs, but since it is strongly influenced by past and future experiences, intelligence is not static or set. Both heredity and environment play heavy roles in intelligence, maybe 50-50. The age-old nature-nurture interaction. And the limits to intelligence due to heredity are poorly understood. Identical twins share identical genes, but do not have identical IQs, which are even less identical among identical twins reared apart. Modification of the environment can appreciably influence intelligence, but nailing the exact environmental factors responsible has eluded us. Children in the most privileged of environments may stagnate and underachieve. Children in the most hostile of environments may excel. So teachers should challenge all students without entertaining preconceived notions of limited potentials. Zones of proximal development, potentials, cannot be predicted and may be quite large, even in borderline students. To sort out the effects of genetics and environment in intelligence, it must be remembered that differences within groups experiencing the same environment can be attributed to genetics. Differences between groups experiencing different environments cannot be attributed to genetics. Let's take the pot analogy. Not weed, a potted plant. Pot A has well-fertilized soil. Pot B has poor soil. If a handful of seeds are planted from the same bag of seed into both pots, and differences are noted in the height of the resultant plants, you can infer that differences within pot A plants are due to heredity, since nothing differs but the plant's genes. You cannot make the same inferences about differences between the two pots of plants. The entirely different environments make estimations due to heredity or genes impossible. As an example, the Burghu people of Japan are the poorest in Japan, and have suffered generations of discrimination because of their ancestors' work as tanners and butchers, considered unclean and a violation of Buddhist religious rules forbidding killing animals and touching dead bodies. The law freed the Buraku people years ago, but social change takes a long time. Their IQ scores in Japan are considerably lower than other segments of Japanese people. Yet with Japanese who have immigrated to the United States, the Buraku children do as well as any other Japanese American. Other discrimination examples which have minority children scoring 10 to 15 points lower on IQ tests than the dominant group's children are the Harahans, the untouchables in India, West Indians in Great Britain, the Maoris in New Zealand, the Oriental Jews in Israel, and African Americans in the United States. So if we do not really know with any certainty exactly what intelligence is, then how can we measure it? IQ tests do not measure intelligence. Remember, we can't even agree on the definition of intelligence. What IQ tests do appear able to measure and predict are academic achievement and school success, not intelligence and life success. IQ tests are unable to test potential development, zones of proximal development. They are unable to test motivation, social skills, personality, drive, emotional maturity, creativity, willingness to work hard, resiliency, optimism, cultural factors, or even luck in who you know. Just as there are a myriad of factors which do not appreciably influence IQ test scores, there are a myriad of factors which do influence individual test scores and shouldn't. Mood, interruptions, headaches, no breakfast, the yelling or the beating received the night before, the anxiety created by IQ tests being timed, etc. Timed IQ tests equate intelligence with speed, which appreciably handicaps the child who works best slowly and deliberately. So interpret IQ test scores with much caution and never use them as a sole evaluating measure of a person's intelligence. All students should be challenged without entertaining preconceived notions of limited potentials. Zones of proximal development, potentials cannot be predicted and may be quite large even in students that are on the borderline. Even Alfred Binet, who is credited with developing the first systematic intelligence tests, did not believe he was testing innate ability, but rather was identifying children in school who needed help. Binet and Simon, 1904 in France, developed a series of testing and comparing successful and unsuccessful children. They were able, in 1905, to determine a mental age, a score based on the average abilities for that age group. A child's mental age was the age at which most children were successful with the same items as he or she. A child would have a mental age of 8 if his or her successful items were those answered successfully by most 8-year-olds, regardless of how old he or she really was chronologically. When introduced into the United States, Binet's mental age test was expanded by William Stern in 1912 to include the concept of intelligence quotient, IQ, the score comparing mental and chronological ages. Divide mental age by chronological age and multiply by 100. Children with average intelligence would have a mental age that equaled his or her chronological age. Then 1 times 100 would give an IQ of 100. Now, IQ is calculated by comparing a person's score with the scores of others in the same general age group. The average score for an age group is fixed at 100, and 2/3 of all scores fall between 85 and 115, plus or minus 15. Tests come with tables of norms based on the average performance of large samples. Actual test scores can be converted directly into IQ scores. Individually administered IQ tests like the Stanford-Binet and the Wechsler scales are better predictors of academic success than are group-administered IQ tests. With individually administered IQ tests, there is one-to-one contact with an adult. Questions are for the most part asked orally, requiring little reading and writing. With group-administered IQ tests, results are much less likely to be reliable. Perhaps a child's pencil broke, or a nearby child sneezed and snotted, or the intercom blasted in the middle of an important reasoning step. Do not put much stake on group-administered IQ tests. The results are not very reliable. A non-traditional, individually administered IQ test is called the Kaufman Assessment Battery for Children, the KABC. It is for children aged 2.5 to 12.5 years. It employs Vygotsky's scaffolding principle by allowing the examiner to clarify what is expected using a different language, gestures, or different words once the child fails the first 3 items in a subtest. The KABC included children from minority groups and children with disabilities in the norming sample. It also has a nonverbal scale for children with hearing impairments or children who have another language besides English as their primary language. Children who come from different cultural backgrounds than the background of the school they attend have more difficulty adjusting and learning. They have to deal with things they are not at all connected with at home. They don't interact socially the same way at home as they do in school, so things are so unfamiliar. Mental retardation is significantly below average intellectual and adaptive social behavior. You must have both: significantly below average intellectual behavior, significantly below average adaptive social behavior. And you must also have a third thing: mental retardation must be evident before the age of 18 to be considered mental retardation. 10 to 25% of mental retardation cases are due to organic physical causes like rubella, venereal disease, alcohol use, drug use, blood type incompatibility, preemie birth, lead poisoning, PKU, Tay-Sachs. The greatest majority of mental retardation cases are due to unknown causes. Down syndrome is not one of these unknown cause. It's not one of the conditions that's caused by an unknown reason. We know the reason here: 3 copies instead of 2 for chromosome number 21, called trisomy 21. It can also be caused by a translocation of part of chromosome 21 onto another chromosome. 97% of cases of Down syndrome are due to chance abnormalities during meiosis, the production of gametes, usually due to the abnormalities in the ovum. 3% of cases are due to translocation of part of 21 onto another chromosome in mother or father. The greatest percentage of Down victims are mentally retarded. A few have normal or above average intelligence and can learn well. 75% are miscarried. 1 in every 700 babies born alive have Down syndrome or has Down syndrome. It's very rare in African Americans. These babies are easygoing and they grow into delightful youngsters for the most part. They can be trained to perform well in structured jobs and can be productive adult citizens. Down syndrome can range from severe to mild. Youngsters are often pleasant, easygoing, and delightful. Lovely to be around. There are other medical problems like cardiac involvement and higher incidence of leukemia that coexist with Down syndrome. It doesn't appear to be inherited. Only 4% inherited tendency has been found. One of a set of identical twins can have Down syndrome and the other be normal. The risk of Down syndrome is greater with older parents. More than 70% live into their 60s. After the age of 35 years, Down syndrome victims share pathology with Alzheimer's victims, the same type of brain lesions and neuritic plaques. Learning disability is not retardation. Victims can be extremely bright. Learning is optimized using a different approach. There's a different key needed to access knowledge. Often a child with learning disability is much more accomplished in verbal or math while being deficient in the other, so there is a wide discrepancy in performance comparisons. Children have twice the processing load to do because speaking, writing, and listening are all cognitive tasks for them rather than associative tasks, necessitating only one thing at a time. Associative tasks allow more than one thing to be done at the same time, and for most of us, speaking, writing, and listening are associative tasks. Driving is also, except when you are first learning to drive or when you are driving under hazardous conditions. Children with learning disability are distractible, which means they pay attention to everything. They're unable to filter out interfering stimuli. But they shouldn't feel alone. There are many famous victims. Leonardo da Vinci wrote backwards. Woodrow Wilson didn't learn the alphabet until age 8 and didn't read until age 11. He was labeled dull and backward. Auguste Rodin, the famous artist-sculptor, was poor in math and spelling. He was described as ineducable and an idiot. General George Patton couldn't read or write at age 12, had a special reader all through West Point. Winston Churchill also had learning disabilities as all the others that I've just mentioned did. Albert Einstein had learning disabilities. He didn't talk until he was 4 years old. He didn't read until he was 9. He was considered backward. And if Einstein is considered backward, goodness, what about the rest of us? Thomas Edison never learned to spell. He only attended school 3 months at the age of 8 years old, and it didn't work out. He was self-taught. Again, many famous victims of learning disabilities. So if you have one, it's no excuse to give up. You're in good company. Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder, ADHD, is a disruptive behavior disorder marked by excessive difficulty sustaining attention, marked by increased impulsiveness, marked by increased restlessness, and oftentimes overactivity. ADHD is a disability, but it doesn't have to be a disaster. It occurs before the age of 7, more in boys than in girls. 3 to 5 out of every 100 people have ADHD. Behavior is in excess of expected behavior for the child's developmental level. It is pervasive. That means it occurs in at least 2 settings, and the symptoms have been there all of life. Symptoms may be due to anxiety if the symptoms are present only during specific times, like math class, or in school, or when parents argue. Symptoms may be due to depression if they start after a stressful time, weren't there before, but after a divorce or a birth or a death or a new house, they appear. 85% of ADHD children who need psychostimulant drugs like Ritalin for hyperactivity and or distractibility will not need it by adolescence. 15% will need drugs throughout adolescence and into young adult life. 30% of ADHD victims fail to respond to psychostimulant drugs. The cause of attention deficit hyperactive disorder involves multiple brain networks and chemical messengers: dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, GABA. Only 50% of referrals are actually diagnosed as ADHD. A complete medical and psychological evaluation is necessary because too many illnesses in reaction to drugs like antihistamine and theophylline and steroids give ADHD-like symptoms. Conflicting parental styles of management and discipline can mimic ADHD. Witnessing abuse or being a victim of abuse can also mimic symptoms. Limited tolerance to high stimulation can also mimic ADHD. So a complete medical and psychological evaluation, these are necessary. There's too many other things that can slide by and mimic a true case. Treatment includes psychostimulant drugs for some. Parent training, social skills training, classroom interventions, these are also very important, especially for the children, the 30% who fail to respond to psychostimulant drugs. So you can't just pop a pill and expect your problems to be over. Treatment includes parent training, social skills, and classroom interventions. The emotional, social, and family problems of victims with ADHD can take on a life of their own, becoming more of a disability than the ADHD itself. As for emotional problems, there is increased frustration, increased failure, increased feelings of inadequacy or being bad. 60% may externalize these feelings: aggression, fights, impulsively striking out, blaming others, class clowning, temper tantrums, lying, stealing. Others may internalize feelings: depression, withdrawal, poor self-image, or they may channel feelings into the body and develop headaches and stomach aches or vague complaints of backaches or pains in the hands or legs. With emotional problems, victims with ADHD avoid the activities that cause feelings of failing and pain. They take a passive approach to things, learned helplessness. Social problems involve interference with all aspects of life, not just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but baseball, hopscotch, setting the table, and watching television as well. Victims with ADHD do not get along well with children their own age. They cannot successfully do what their peers can do, so they withdraw into the house or play with younger children who are doing the things they can do. For example, a 9-year-old with a visual, perceptual, and fine motor problem may not be able to handle sports and games that his or her peers are playing, but can do the gross motor skills of 5 and 6-year-olds, like running, jumping, and climbing. As for family problems of victims with ADHD, there is denial, there is anger, there is guilt. Siblings are asking themselves, is it my fault? Is it contagious? I get punished, but he or she gets away with it. And then they feel guilt because they're told to understand and accept, but they feel anger. So the problems associated with ADHD include emotional, social, and family problems. Tips for handling children with ADHD. Look at the total child. Build on strengths, demagnify weaknesses. Ignoring you? Maybe not. This child may not be able to distinguish your voice from all the other noises in the room. So call the name and establish eye contact before beginning to talk. Sequencing problem? Well, then set a place as a model rather than expect the child to set the table by themselves, or give them a model problem in a test situation so that they can refer back to it. Eye-hand coordination? Switch to a gross motor sport like swimming or horseback riding, bowling, golf, soccer. Success breeds improved self-image, confidence, and willingness to try. Avoid social disaster by talking to scout leaders ahead of time, or anyone else who's in charge of your child, to suggest that the child with ADHD be allowed to do something they can handle well. For instance, when there's a Thanksgiving project, allow this child with ADHD to squirt the paste versus cutting out the turkey, since gross motor is far more manageable than fine motor. Gifted and talented refers to a program for very bright, creative, talented students with an IQ of 130 or above. There is a high potential in a specific area like math or science. These youngsters can process information unusually efficiently, especially on novel tasks requiring imagination. GT, or Gifted and Talented, emerged in the late 1950s as a reaction to Russia's launch of Sputnik. A student with the Gifted and Talented designation may have a particular arena of expertise and high ability, while being normal or below normal in other areas. He or she may or may not have a sizable mismatch between mind and emotion. This student excels in processing information. He or she can do it faster. He or she has better reasoning and uses better strategies, is better at monitoring own understanding. Students in this gifted and talented category should be encouraged with abstract thinking and creativity and independence, not just learning more facts. For the extremely advanced IQ of 160 or above, the only practical solution may be acceleration into early college or graduate school. For the most part, GT students can be challenged in normal classes without being segregated. Ellen Winner, a GT expert, named 3 characteristics that GT students have: inborn precocity, or high ability in a particular area, gift, or talent; They master this area or gift earlier than peers and with little or no effort. They march to their own drummer, requiring less structure and teacher direction, less scaffolding, less learning aids. They solve problems in their gifted area in unique ways, and they make discoveries on their own. There is a passion to master with intense interest, an ability to focus on arena of expertise. They do not need nudging and are internally motivated. Now for an adult definition of fairness, considering all these exceptionalities and individual differences. An adult concept of fairness does not mean treating everyone the same. Fairness is everyone getting what they need. Consider this example. I am versed in CPR, and someone has a heart attack or begins with the symptoms of a heart attack. I can save the life of this person. But because I have a juvenile idea of what fairness means, I announce, "Sir, I'd very much like to help you, but this room is crowded, and I don't have time to give it to everyone. It's not fair to give it to just you." How ludicrous, how ridiculous that sounds. This person needs it, no one else does. But yet teachers do this all the time. Fairness, an adult concept of fairness, does not mean treating everyone the same. It means giving to each what is needed. Learned helplessness is giving up even though success is possible. Learned helplessness results when a child experiences too much failure and has no control. There is little motivation to help self due to the belief that failure is inevitable. Like Seligman's dogs, children faced with no success in their early years accept passively the failing grades that come later. Seligman's dogs had no chance to escape shock initially and just lay down accepting shocks later, even though they had the power to escape. But children are not dogs, and there are 3 additional dimensions to learned helplessness when talking about humans. One of them is lack of control. Lack of control due to external forces is bad enough, like magic or mean teacher or luck. But lack of control attributed to self or internal reasons is worse. For instance, I'm dumb, I'm stupid, I'm slow. A second additional dimension, stable versus unstable circumstances. If a child believes his or her predicament is long-lasting or permanent, learned helplessness is more likely. If the situation is believed to be temporary, the child is less likely to fall victim to learned helplessness. And the third added dimension, global versus specific circumstances. If a child believes his or her shortcomings apply to many or all situations, learned helplessness is far more likely. Mastery is the opposite of learned helplessness. It is developed if teachers emphasize learning and trying and effort rather than goal performance and innate ability. If what a child knows is stressed rather than what he or she doesn't know, mastery is more probable. If definite small successes are set up on a daily basis and celebrated, mastery is more probable, and learned helplessness is less likely. We've scratched the surface on individual differences in intellectual and physical abilities. Individual differences include various disabilities, various gifts and talents, language differences, cultural differences, and SES differences. There are many other differences among students, like cognitive style and learning style preferences. As for language differences, don't force students to abandon their first language. The more proficient they are in that first language, the faster they will master English. Mastering academic language skills in a new language takes 5 to 7 years. The general strategy of bilingual teachers is to teach in the language to be acquired, but to use the first language of the learner when necessary to ensure comprehension. This is called code switching. Dialect is a rule-governed variation of a language spoken by a particular group, an ethnic group, a social group, a regional group. Dialects are not inferior languages and should be respected. However, standard English should be taught for academics. SES, socioeconomic status, refers to levels or classes of society based on income, power, background, and prestige. SES has a notable positive correlation with school achievement, but actual attitudes and behaviors of a child's family life seem to be more important than income or lack of it. With low SES comes more than a lack of money. Poor health care, more stresses, more school interruptions and absences, discrimination for non-cool clothes and shoes and grammar mistakes, lower expectations from teachers, low self-esteem, more learned helplessness. So there's a lot more that comes with low SES than strictly a lack of money. There are different child-rearing styles in different SES levels. Low SES parents talk less to their babies and children. There's a non-stimulating atmosphere prevalent. They explain less, they give fewer choices, less encouragement, less reading, less library trips, etc. They command more and they teach less. Public Law 94-142 was passed in 1975. It was called the Education for All Handicapped Children Act. It required that each special needs student be educated in the least restrictive environment according to an individualized education program, an IEP. The least restrictive environment is the age-appropriate neighborhood school, or the school a child would have attended had there been no disability. The IEP is an annual team planning meeting with teachers and parents and therapists and students to set goals and program modifications and to set strategies to meet these goals. PL 94-142 is a giant step over early laws which gave schools the right to exclude children with disabilities from education. By 1975, the public was more aware of the idea that even children with disabilities had the right to a public education, and so PL 94-142 was passed. Children with mild to moderate disabilities were first to be included in normal classes, if even on a part-time basis. It took until the mid to late 1980s for a real push to include children with severe disabilities as well in age-appropriate neighborhood schools they would have attended had there been no disabilities. In 1990, PL 94-142 was renamed to IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. This newer law uses people first language and uses disability instead of handicap. Disability is a limitation, not a handicap. A handicap is a limitation imposed by environment and attitudes of people toward people with disabilities. IDEA stresses early intervention and free, appropriate public education for all, from ages birth to 21 years. Inclusive education means individualizing education to meet every student's needs regardless of abilities. That's not the same thing as mainstreaming. Mainstreaming means allowing children with disabilities to attend portions of a school day with so-called normal peers. In successful inclusion programs that have the proper teacher and paraprofessional training, plus special education support services, it is being found that even the most profoundly affected children have hidden potentials which can be tapped. These potentials have little chance of ever being tapped if the child is encapsulated in a homogeneous group with no role models. The transition into adulthood has more chance to be successfully bridged with early daily interactions with children of differing abilities. Coexistence with peers in school lays the groundwork for transition into adult society later. Segregation of children with disabilities has been around for centuries, and change does not come easily. But entrenched attitudes can be changed. Like Shaw wrote in 1941, you see things and you say, why? But I dream of things that never were, and I say, why not?